Good evening, everyone. This is our regular board meeting for the Richland School District 2 Board of Trustees for Tuesday, October 27th, 2020. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 4:30 p.m. And now we will entertain a motion regarding executive session, which is item 2.1.
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Caution Parker.
I move that we convene executive session for the discussion of student appeals, student admission requests into the district's adult education program.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Mrs. Mackey. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will register our vote at this time.
Hand vote for me, Mr.
If you're not
Chair, in the affirmative.
if you're not logged in, you can do a hand vote at this time
Hand
in
vote.
favor. Favor?
In the affirmative, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, hand vote. This is Dr. Holmes, hand
Thank
vote.
you. Thank you, Dr. Holmes.
Vote is 7-0.
Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you all. Good evening, everyone. We were in executive session beginning at 4:30, and the motion was made by Dr. Caution Parker, seconded by Mrs. Mackey, and the motion carried. So now, is there a motion to reconvene public session?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Mackey?
I move that we reconvene the public session of the Richland 2 School Board of Trustees, indicating that making a note that we finished our business in executive session at 4:39 p.m.
Thank you. Is there a second? All right, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, please register your vote.
Second.
Okay, Dr. Caution, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, please register your vote.
Vote is 7-0.
Thank you, the motion carried. Dr. Holmes, if you can mute yourself, that'd be good. Thank you. All right, and so we did have executive session where we discussed student appeals and student admission requests into the district's adult education program. And as Mrs. Mackey said in her motion, the business ended at 4:39 p.m. Thank you. Now we will move on to item 3.1, inspirational moment and the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, I wanted to share a few words from Peter Cookson's book entitled Sacred Trust, a Children's Education Bill of Rights, a Children's Education Bill of Rights. There can be no keener revelation of society's soul than the way in which it treats its children, as quoted by Nelson Mandela. Children are a disinherited class. How we care for, educate, and prepare for our young Americans to thrive and lead in an uncertain and challenging world is and will be the measure of our national soul. It is important that we recapture our soul as a people by becoming stewards of the future and by protecting, nurturing, educating, and celebrating our greatest national asset, our children. It is important that every American child feels that he or she is participating in a grand effort to make the world a better place, not just for the fortunate, but for those who struggle. Every generation should be the greatest generation. There can be no real excellence without equity. Every American should feel a stake in the conversation that or otherwise we are likely to keep spinning our wheels ad nauseum. Every child should feel cared for, protected. Imagine the school that welcomes parents no matter what their backgrounds. The vision is not pie in the sky. It is within our grasp as a system and as a nation. As we round out National Principals Appreciation Month, I salute you. I salute you, principals, for your investment into the treatment of children. I salute you for caring for the way we care for, educate, and prepare our young Americans to thrive and lead in an ever-changing and oftentimes challenging world. I salute you for being stewards of the future and by protecting, nurturing, educating, and celebrating our greatest national asset, our children. I salute you for working to level the playing fields that are often skewed by poverty and deep social inequalities. I salute you for making our children feel that they are participating in the creation of a world that keeps getting better and better, not just for the fortunate, but for those who struggle. I salute you for teaching every generation that they can and will be the greatest generation. I salute you for working to build systems of excellence as well as equity. I salute you for making every child within your grasp feel cared for, protected, and welcome, no matter what their backgrounds. Principals cannot do it alone. As Jamie Vollmer, the author, has written, schools cannot do it alone. It takes a collaborative effort and keen interest and compassion by principals, administrators, teachers, faculty, staff members, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, school nurses, social workers, parents, community members, and countless others who care for our students. At the helm of our schools, however, are principals. And on this month and every month, I salute you. I appreciate you. Thank you for your service of investing in the lives of our future. There can be no keener revelation of society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. At this time, if you'll all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Give me just a minute, Ms. Maggie. I'll get you.
I will be happy to, yes, ma'am.
All right, good to go.
Now that the flag is displayed, you all are welcome to join me as we recite I Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mackey. And now we'll move on to item 4.1, approval of agenda. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Mackey,
I move to approve the agenda of the October 27th, 2020 regular board meeting of the Richland 2 School Board of Trustees.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, please register your vote at this time. Is anyone else having an issue with it coming up? I do. Oh, here we go.
Mr. Shad,
Yes, Ms. McDaniel?
what's your vote?
It's in the affirmative, it's yes.
Oh, okay. The vote is 6-1.
Thank you, the motion carries. Now to item 5.1, approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Mackey,
I move to approve the October 27th, 2020 regular board meeting consent agenda for Richland 2.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Holmes. Any discussion? Seeing none, please register your vote.
Vote is 7-0.
Thank you, the motion carries. Now moving on to item 6.1, public participation, and it will be presented by Ms. Libby Roof.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. We had 21 forms turned in while we had the form open from Friday through 1 o'clock today. And at this time, I'm going to read half of them, and then for the first section, and then when we get to the second public participation section, I'll read the other half. So I'll begin now. First one is from Kendra Gandy. As a teacher in the district, I am concerned about reopening for phase 2. The numbers are currently rising in our zip codes. It seems we are ignoring the data and plowing ahead regardless of infection numbers. There is also no clear plan for what will happen if an outbreak occurs after opening. Will we return to phase 2 if the numbers go back up to high? I also would like to address the requirement to work from the school buildings on Fridays. There is no good reason for teachers to come into the building on an asynchronous learning day. It simply opens up the opportunity for more spread of the virus. The district should trust teachers to be the professionals that they are and work in a way that is best and safest for them. I'm also extremely disappointed that teachers with serious health concerns are being denied any type of leave. If you need teachers so bad, you should care about their health and safety. From Maggie Boyce. This is my 13th year teaching, and all 13 have been at Blythewood High School. I have been denied my request now 3 times by the district to continue to teach virtually as we enter phase 2. I have severe asthma, hypertension, and I have an autoimmune disorder that causes me to take 2 medications that suppress my immune system. These medications make me more vulnerable to get respiratory illnesses such as COVID-19. The cleaning products used to clean the classrooms and the schools are strong and can also cause me to have asthma attacks. I have been denied to teach virtually by HR because they claim that it would create an undue hardship to the district to hire another employee to monitor my students in person. I believe it would create an undue hardship for my students as they would no longer have a Spanish teacher if I leave, or it would create an undue hardship for my family if I catch COVID-19 and die. To quote a colleague of mine, I love teaching, but I love living more. I just want to continue teaching my students virtually from the safety of my home. And going into phase 2, 54.54% of my students are continuing e-learning. That being said, the minimum of 1 student and the maximum of 7 students, the amount of students that would be in my classroom at any given time. I know that my principal and my school are able to find an adult to monitor my students, or they could be split up and put in the back of other classes, the library, or the auditorium. I don't want to abandon my students or my career. However, I don't want to die even more. Rhonda Meisner. Can the board address what is being done to ensure the safety of the students, the teachers, and staff as they return to school on November 4th, 2020? The board candidate, I would think information regarding educational bloodborne pathogen and airborne pathogens should be distributed with potential sign-offs of completion would be required. Also, explain the steps for monitoring all entrance to the facilities along with proposed response plans for a spike or outbreak, as well as transition to face-to-face learning. I think it is critical that we keep our students and parents informed and well. Melissa Gilbert. I'm a Richland 2 graduate and have been teaching in Richland 2 for 10 years now. This year, the world was rocked by COVID-19, and I knew that things would be different this school year. This summer, I researched and practiced strategies to ensure my students would receive the most effective instruction possible in an e-learning format. When the announcement was made that we'd be moving to phase 2, I met with my doctor. He informed me that returning to the school could be a deadly option as I am higher risk of morbidity should I get COVID-19. He wrote a letter stating this, and I shared it with my principal and the district office with a request to receive accommodations to teach from home. The DO denied my request, stating that it would cause them an undue hardship. I'm left with no choice but to request leave through FMLA or non-qualified FMLA. These options would leave my students without a teacher and would cause an even bigger hardship to my school administration. If my request for leave is denied, then I'll have no option but to resign, as returning could cause my family the greatest undue hardship if I were to die from COVID-19. Catherine Perry. Hello, I'm a teacher in the district, and I'm writing to ask you to consider changing the current plan to allow teachers to work from home on Fridays during phase 2. I want to thank the superintendent and the school board for committing to the safety of our students and staff for the past 40 days. I do not think the data demonstrates that it is time to move to phase 2, but here we are. If I am being transparent with the board, I must tell you that I'm afraid to go back to face-to-face instruction at this time. I have a history of asthma, and my husband is a type 1 diabetic. I submitted a request for accommodation of not being placed in high volume areas of my school for duty in order to limit my contact with students. This request was denied. I did not ask to stay home, nor did I ask to not serve duty. I simply asked for considerations as to where I would serve lunch duty, etc. I thought this was a small and reasonable request, but was still denied. I have been successfully working with students online during phase 1. I do not see a compelling reason why teachers should be in the school buildings on Fridays when we have demonstrated that we can succeed with virtual learning and working from home. Thank you for your time and consideration. Lisa Ellis. Good evening. I am super grateful to Richland 2 for paying attention to the data and starting the year virtually. Through phase 1, I felt as if the district was concerned about my well-being as an employee. On the decision to enter phase 2, I'm reluctant to make the statement. The plans for phase 2 place unrealistic expectations on the teachers across all grade levels. Throughout this entire process, teachers have expressed how much time it takes to prep for this new teaching model. This will only get worse as we move to phase 2, where teachers are expected to teach both in person and virtual at the same time. I've heard from teachers across the state who are already teaching in this model, and they state they are drowning. And yet members of the district office have chosen not to listen to the concerns of teachers. We have asked for time and yet have only been given the afternoons on Friday, and that time has not been guaranteed to be unencumbered. We asked for time on the teacher workday on Monday, November 2nd, and yet middle schools and high schools have to host the rising 6th graders and 9th graders, even though we already did this back in August. Teaching is a tough job on the best days, but we are currently teaching during a pandemic, which some may consider the worst of days. It certainly isn't the best of days. I believe that the decision makers have lost sight of that. Teachers are doing the best they can with what they have, and yet the expectation from the district office and community is teaching as usual. No, these are not unusual times, and expectations need to be adjusted. I believe Richland 2 has improved in giving teachers a seat at the table. Now it is vital to listen to what they have to say when they are at the table and before decisions are made. One last statement to add. I enjoyed hearing the perspective of the Richland 2 candidates for the school board last Tuesday. On one particular issue, Mr. Shad spoke to the idea that the school board has one employee, and that is the superintendent. However, I don't think he is correct. My teacher contract states at the top, this agreement is entered into by and between the Board of Trustees of School District Number 2 of Richland County, hereinafter referred to as the employer, and Ellis Lisa E., hereinafter referred to as the employee. Thanks for your time and commitment. Sincerely, Lisa Ellis. Christina Chamberlain. Good evening. First, I want to say that I have been a proud teacher in Richland 2 for 12 years. During that time, I am proud to say that I work for and have my children attend Richland 2 schools. Our leadership has always been outstanding, and I've always felt that the district acted in the interest of what is best for parents, students, and teachers. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case, and this letter will not be one supporting my district or school board. These words come from disappointment, hurt, and fear. I was originally so proud that our district stood its ground and vowed it would not return face-to-face until COVID-19 cases were down and it was safe to do so. But that seemed to change a few weeks ago. We are set to return to cases as deaths in our states are rising. We are set to spend hours a day in small, poorly ventilated classrooms with only a mask and some hand sanitizer to keep us safe. I was personally told that I would not receive any medical accommodations for phase 2 other than a mask. Moving forward, I am to teach both virtually and in person 5 days a week, clean and sanitize all desks and surfaces after each class, allow students to take off their masks, eat breakfast and lunch in my classroom, and to clean after them and disinfect again after they eat. This is not what I signed up for. This is not teaching. I am to do this while cases are rising. I am to do this with multiple medical ailments that put me in the high-risk category, and I'm more likely to die if infected with COVID. I am to do this as a single mom. If I die, my daughter has nobody, no family left. That leaves an 8th grader to be put in the system. This is unacceptable for her and me, but I am the only one. But I am not the only one. I am just one of hundreds with the same story. We are told that we support you, but I don't feel the support or love that I used to from my district. I feel like a pawn in a political game. I feel like a test subject in an experimental study that I didn't sign up for. I don't see how it's okay to tell teachers in our district that we will get through this together when we are not standing together as one. How is it okay for teachers to be mandated to their buildings 5 days a week while district employees work from home? While school board meetings are still virtual because it isn't safe to meet in person. I love teaching. It is my heart and passion, but we are being asked to sacrifice too much. I ask you today to look around the virtual room and tell me who you're willing to sacrifice. How many dead teachers is too many? Steve Newsom. Dr. Davis, Chairman Shad, and members of the board, good evening and thank you for the opportunity to provide thoughts and feedback. No modern school system has had to respond to the issues and obstacles that have arisen as a result of COVID-19, and I believe all district officials and employees deserve praise for their efforts in simply keeping the district running, especially with our unique geographical and demographic challenges. Thank you for your efforts. I'm writing tonight with the intention of helping in those efforts by providing as best I can a representative school staff perspective on reopening plans so far, and specifically on the plan as I understand it to require school staff to work physically in buildings on Friday. I believe that school staff have ably demonstrated over the past 7 months that we can and do work productively in a virtual format. Most teachers had a very successful spring and are in the midst of a very successful fall working with students, meeting virtually with colleagues, providing feedback, and planning high-quality lessons, all virtually. I do not believe being physically present in the building, other than on days when students are present, will have any positive impact on our ability to do our jobs. In fact, I'm concerned that the more days we are present, the greater the risk that we will become sick or be quarantined due to close contact at school, which will not only jeopardize our health, but will hurt our ability to be in school when students are present. Thanks to the district's investment in technology and my own hard work, I've been able to safely work from home and would ask for the ability to continue to do so. Respectfully, I do not believe that this is time for us to reopen physically after record highs in new cases nationally last week and aggregate increases within zip codes for each of the past 3 weeks, with increases classified as high under the DHEC guidelines for the most recent week in 29203, 29229, and 29206. But if we do open, we should at least keep the number of bodies in the building as low as possible, doing any work possible remotely. Students at my school, who almost universally live in 29229, have shared anxieties throughout the quarter which reflect these trends, with many very worried about infecting parents or other family members or infecting teachers or parents who are teachers. This is also why I asked the district to rethink any fresh start plans that involve students from both A and B days, including being present at the same time, since this may in essence defeat the purpose of moving to a hybrid schedule, since every student in a given freshman advisory or course could potentially show up for the same class on the same day. Allowing employees the opportunity to work from home when students are not in the building will help keep not only teachers and instructional staff safe, but also allow custodial staff to clean more safely and limit the exposure administrators and support staff will experience. I'm hoping that you will consider the benefit and risk mitigation available if we are allowed to work from home. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you and your loved ones good health and safety. Michelle Cannon. Our percent of cases is not consistently below the 10% determined to be safe, so why are we opening? Mandy Collins. Dear school board members and Dr. Davis, I wanted to begin this letter by letting you know that I have been your biggest cheerleader so far. This is not that letter. As a parent and employee, I am disappointed. I have colleagues who were denied accommodations. We are returning after Halloween, which means students will be attending parties and trick-or-treating. Promises for social distancing and personal safety have gone by the wayside. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the added paperwork that has been dumped on special education teachers. We are required to update the student service delivery plan each time we change phases. The initial creation of the document, phone calls, documentation enriched, creation of prior written notices, uploading of documents, and emailing parents took nearly 27 hours for me to complete for 30 students. This was not a loss of time with my students because that really wasn't really an option. I spent evenings and weekends completing these. As we are going into phase 2, this process begins again. AVID is still required. State standards have not been slowed or modified, even though the time we have in each class period has been reduced. We are constantly asked how to show grace to students' parents, but who has shown us grace? We are still being held accountable just as we were pre-pandemic. We are still expected to show grit and get it done. Why are employees housed at R2I2 allowed to continue to work from home even after teachers and students return? What message does this send to teachers? We feel expendable, disregarded, and lied to. My 11th grader has submitted a letter on her experience while taking the PSAT. I won't speak for her, but you know the real reason she wrote this letter. She is scared. She sleeps in my bed at night since being told that I'm returning. She is scared that I will die. What do I tell her? I can no longer tell her that we will be socially distanced or that students will have masks on all day because they have to eat lunch and have mask breaks. Our family has not been on vacation, to a church service, dined in a restaurant, attended family celebrations, yet I'll be eating lunch with students with no real way to be 6 feet apart. All sacrifices that my family has made are tossed out the window. I want to personally invite each and every one of you to visit and have lunch with us, to take your mask off and enjoy. What you are asking teachers to do is not surprising. We have also always been asked to do more than what we should have to do. We work well beyond what we are compensated for. And maybe you may be sitting here tonight thinking, why didn't she get a job where she can teach virtually all year? I did have a position at R2E school, was sent back to my former school 2 days before school began. As a career changer, I felt that this was my calling. This is what God designed me to do. But as I have been told all my life, Use the good sense that God has given you. This will be a year when education loses some of the best. How will we premiere when highly qualified teachers who will fill those shoes? I have already placed my vote for the third, and I will continue to use my teacher voice in the future. Teachers are watching. And Mr. Shad will stop there and pick back up at the second part.
Okay, thank you. And now we move to item 7.1, voting on executive session items. 7.1, student appeals. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Mackey?
with regard to the student appeal for this evening, I move to uphold the district's recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Caution Parker. Any discussion? Seeing none, please register your vote.
Mr. Chair, I think I've got a Wi-Fi hang up for a second, but I'm voting in the affirmative.
Okay, thank you.
My screen seems to have frozen.
Mr. Shad,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a vote on my screen for you.
Okay, I voted in the affirmative as well.
Alrighty. Vote is 6-1.
All right, thank you. The motion carries. All right, item 7.2, student admission request into the district's adult education program. Is there a motion?
Mr. Shad,
Yes, Ms. Holmes?
I never got a pop-up, so, on that vote, the last vote.
Okay.
Dr. Holmes, I thought you raised your hand.
Okay, I am voting in the affirmative, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I did not get a pop-up. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. McDaniel.
And Mr. Shad,
Yes, Ms. Zagastini.
was that, I believe I voted to abstain, so when she said 6-1,
Okay.
was that 6 yes with 1 abstention?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to clarify that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So for the record, it was 6 in favor of the motion, no nays, and 1 abstention by Mrs. Agostini. Thank you. All right, now to 7.2, student admission request into the district's adult education program. Is there
Mr.
a motion?
Chair, I'm
Mrs.
sorry,
Mackey?
Mr. Chair. With regard to the 3 student admission requests into the district's adult education program, I move to approve, and I'm voting in the affirmative. Well, once there's a second and we get to and you call for the vote because I'm.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Agostini. Any discussion? Seeing none, please register your vote.
I'm voting in the affirmative, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, the affirmative, I'm not getting a signal.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Holmes. And I voted in the affirmative as well, just in case.
Vote is 7-0.
Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you very much. Now to old business action requested. Item 8.1, approval of the 2021-2022 school year calendar. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini?
I move to approve calendar B for the 2021-2022 school year as presented by administration.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Dr. Holmes. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, please register your vote at this time.
Mr. Chair, I am voting in the affirmative. I've had to reboot my computer.
Thank you, Mrs. Mackey.
Mr. Chair, I'm voting in the affirmative. I'm getting no signal.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. And just in case, I'm voting in the affirmative as well.
Mr. Chair, since
Okay.
everybody else spoke up, mine stuff is working just fine. I voted no on the PC.
Vote
Thank
is 7-0.
Thank you. The motion passed 7-0. Mr. Manning. All right, and now we'll move to new business, item 9.1, no action requested. budget update. Dr. Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the board, and to our viewing public and our partners out there in Zoom land. We are here this evening to share some information regarding our 2021 budget. This will serve as a brief budget workshop. This workshop is designed to give the district or provide the school board with an overview of what our current budget situation is, with some discussion regarding future budget implications. And so I'll turn this presentation over to Dr. Miley, our CFO, our senior chief for finance, our CFO, as well as I think Shelley Allen will be assisting us, who's our executive director for finance. So with further ado, Dr. Miley.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I think Shelley is on this call as well and will be helping me explain what we've got for you tonight. Just like everything else in the district, teaching, athletics, learning, meal programs, everything else, the budget process was derailed in March by COVID, and we've been dealing with that. And what we wanted to do was kind of refresh everybody's memory about where we were back when we left this back in May and June, tell you about what has changed since then, and then give you an idea of where we are and what we're expecting over the next few months. I think the next slide will be good. Ms. Roof.
Dr. Miley, can I ask you maybe to speak up just a little bit? You're coming in a little softly in volume. So.
Yes, how is this?
That is better. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll use my teaching voice. Well, if you remember back in May, we had, before the COVID, before things had shut down in the middle of March, actually the budget outlook was extremely positive. The House Ways and Means Committee passed a budget as fast, I think, as I've ever seen back in March. The full House approved that. It included substantial raises for teachers, quite a bit of extra funding. The outlook was there was almost a $2 billion surplus, about half of it continuing, recurring, about half of it one-time money. So things were looking awfully positive back in March, and then COVID hit. The Senate Finance Committee changed those based on BEA estimates back in April. And what we normally would have done is we would have taken the Senate Finance estimates. We would have brought you a budget in late April for your two readings. We would have then taken that budget to the county, who then approves it in 3 readings in May. And then we'd have a final budget by the end of May that we would start in July 1. Usually the county would approve that by, first part of June or so. And then our budget would start as of July 1. None of that happened this year. The House projections were thrown in the trash can based on the budget revisions, and the state decided not to pass a budget by June 30th, and they approved a continuing resolution. If you remember, we were worried about this, and we actually brought you a continuing resolution back in April for your consideration, just in case the state left the building without passing a budget, which is what they did. That put the process on hold. We went into the July 1 new year with basically the same budget level spending that you had approved for FY 19-20. We have not revised another budget. We've just been operating on that continuing resolution. The General Assembly left town and had agreed to come back in mid-September to address the budget issue. And as you know, about that same time, the county is finalizing the millage rates for the county. And we were hoping that we would, and I think we told you that we hope to be bringing you a revised budget for 2021 in October or November. The next slide, Libby, if possible. Thank you. So what has changed since May? Unfortunately, not a lot. The process is still on hold. The General Assembly did return in September. They took up a couple of things and they couldn't agree on the budget, and they just left the continuing resolution that they had passed back in June and left it alone. And in that continuing resolution, they had done a couple of things that impacted the districts. They suspended any step increases for teachers. They didn't fund any step increase, and they suspended the step increase. They also, on a positive note, they also suspended the increase in employer contributions. You know, as we've talked about in former years, in the last 4 years, I believe, we've had an increase in the percentage rate that the employer has to contribute to the retirement system, and that costs our district about $2 million a year, and they suspended that 1% increase to take pressure off of state agencies and school districts. And they left town. They did not pass a new budget in September and said they would revisit it in January. At this point, as they were leaving town, the county did adopt a millage rate for us and on third reading, and they did, as we had requested back in May, they left our millage rate flat like it was. It's 331 mills. And so we had no tax increase for operating mills in the district. That's the second year in a row that we've had no millage increase in operating millage. Next slide, thank you. So what do we know at the state level? The state level, as I said, they've just basically continued with the continuing resolution, suspended the step, and delayed the 1% in retirement. House, through everything that the House had done, had been thrown out. Somehow $2 billion is basically evaporated somewhere. And the BEA, the Board of Economic Advisors, which forecasts the tax revenues for the budget process, have been meeting regularly. The last budget meeting, last meeting the Board of Economic Advisors made, they revised the budget. They actually estimated there was additional funds, $86 million, to spend in FY 2021, but they have not adopted that yet. In that last meeting, they regularly interview and have presentations by a variety of economists throughout the state. And one of the things the economists said and projected was that the stimulus funds that the states are getting across the country from the feds are kind of helping the state maintain some of its level of economic activity, but those may dry up before the economy rebounds. And some of the economists had suggested that it may be as many as 6 years out before we fully recover from this recession that we expect. If you put that in perspective, the 2007, 2008 recession was almost 10 years. It almost took us 10 years to fully recover. Next slide. The BEA is going to be meeting again before the end of the year. I believe they meet in mid-November. We don't know what they'll do. One of the concerns by a lot of the people in the room for the board, for the BEA meeting, was if they reduce the revenue estimates for 2021. I mentioned just a minute ago that they had actually estimated the last meeting that there was $86 million. While that sounds like a lot of money, that's not a lot of money at the state level. That they had estimated $86 million additional funds. They can change that if November revenues by that time look more precarious. They can lower the estimate, and they can actually, the statute is listed there, they can actually reduce state agency funding and school district funding by up to 3%. We're hoping that doesn't happen. They set $500 million aside of that $2 billion that they had surplus. They put $500 million aside and said, we'll use that if we need it during the rest of this FY, this fiscal year until June 30th, 21. if we need it to make up for any shortfalls. I don't expect them to have across the board budget cuts, but that doesn't mean that won't happen. So that's one of those potential threats out there that we could see in terms of the rest of this fiscal year. All right, the next slide. So what do we need to do, and where are we right now? In January, the legislature will be coming back the second Tuesday in January. And there are several options, and I've given up trying to guess what the legislature does. But they could do nothing with teacher salaries or the step increase. They could continue they could not do anything in terms of the budget, that we would just operate under the continuing resolution as we are until next June. They could, depending again on what the BEA estimates, they could, for instance, if the BEA estimated there was more money, they could adopt a new budget, allocate funds for whatever they decide to allocate funds for, whether it was teacher raises or anything. We don't know what they'll do, but that would be an option, and we'll have to wait for January to see. Something that the November Board of Economic Advisors meeting should give us a hint. If things are looking worse in November from the BEA, then I would not expect a lot of budget action in January. One of the things that has been, you may have seen from other districts, if the General Assembly does not address the current step, that is the step increase for teacher salaries, our district may want to consider another option. Last January, you approved a bonus for all employees. That could be considered. Other districts I've already heard discussing that. Our recommendation right now is we have not closed out the year fully. We have not finished our audit. Our audit is, our CAFR, our annual audit is due to the State Department of Education December the 1st of every year. They have amended that this year and extended that deadline to the middle of January, a lot because of some of the delays at the State Department and some of the delays in individual districts. So we anticipate finishing our audit. We hope we finish it before the end of the year, but our target is January 15th. That closeout of our year will give us an indication of how we ended at FY 19-20. If we are lucky enough and prudent enough to have a surplus, how much that surplus might be, we don't know yet because we haven't finished closing out. But we recommend that if the district does want to do something, we wait until the Board of Economic Advisors meet in November, till we close out our audit, and whenever we do close it out, as soon as we can close it out, we have a better estimate of the 45-day student count, and an indication of what the General Assembly is going to do in January. So all of those factors are moving parts that we need to consider before we recommend that we do anything in terms of what stepping in if the legislature does not do anything. Next slide. And this is kind of a summary of where we feel like we are. And it's a huge challenge because we have in the past employees compensation is a major priority for the district. So we certainly want to address that, but we've got to balance that and because we know that's important to maintain our recruitment and to maintain our employees and retain our employees. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we balance that with our expectations and the needs for the district in the longer term as well. So that's why we are recommending that we address this in January when we know what the legislature is doing and we know what kind of year we closed out in FY 19-20. Couple of things I wanted to mention that wanted to kind of a bigger picture in terms of the district. We feel like we are in very good shape. We have maintained and contributed to our fund balance every year for the last, I think, 10 years. We maintain a very healthy fund balance. We may find this year may be one of the real reasons why we've done that. We have maintained an excellent bond rating. I think we just updated the board in a board brief about our recent $150 million bond sale. We had an excellent bond rating. We sold that debt at just slightly under 1.5%. We had 8 bidders from across the country. So we feel like we're in very good shape. We've issued now $235 million of our $468 million bond referendum. So we're about halfway through the bond referendum sale, and we have had no increase in our debt service millage. So we feel like that commitment we made to the district community in terms of our prudent use of these funds and the impact on the taxpayer, so far there's been no tax impact to the community from our bond issue, from a bond referendum. Kind of a reminder where we are and where we get our funding for our general operating budget. About $107 million, about a third of our budget comes from local property taxes. That's, as you know, not from owner-occupied residences, but it's from second homes, rental property, businesses, and vehicles and other property. About 63% of our funding comes from the state. The county likes to count our property tax relief as county money, but it's actually a state allocation based on a state formula. So it's actually state funding. And then about 1% from other revenues. The next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Libby, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. That's a little out of sync here. That's the pie chart that I was just referring. The dark blue is the local revenue generated from property taxes. That's the property tax that's generated from the millage that I just mentioned, that was stayed the same this year. The light blue is from the state revenues, it's about 63%. And the other revenue is a little gray area, about 1.1% from other revenue sources. The next slide. And where we spend our money, this is kind of an old hat pie chart too, but it's a good reminder that almost 90% of our general fund budget is for salaries and benefits. 8% for utilities and property, about 2% for some supplies, supplies and equipment, and about 2% for other expenditures. So the vast majority of our budget, as all of you know, is spent on salaries and benefits. The next slide. This was just a little snapshot we thought that might be helpful to show how we're spending our funding. And this is a little bit more than our general fund. This is including some other expenditures like EIA funding. But as you can see from this chart, we spend about almost 93% of our budget expenditures on student and classroom services. About 3% for curriculum development, instructional support, and about 4% for administrative and operational district-wide support. And Shelley, I don't see you, but if I know you're there, if I've forgotten anything or misstated something, please correct me. And if not, I'll open it up for any questions.
You did great.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Board members, any questions for Dr. Davis and the staff? Dr. Elkins?
Mr. Chair. Yes. Mr. Chair.
Okay, hold on. I recognize Dr. Elkins first and then Dr. Holmes.
Okay. Dr. Miley, thank you so much for that presentation. Just a few questions and basically more for clarification. I was looking when you said guidance and counseling, and we're spending 9,113, or is that 9 million? Am I wrong? What's the amount? Okay, thank you for putting it up there. What are we using for guidance and counseling? Kind of explain that to me.
That's expenditures for salaries and staff.
Okay,
Got it.
okay, great. And the other one, what about library and media? Is that also for salaries as well?
Primarily, yes.
Yeah.
Everything on this snapshot here is basically for salaries.
Well, it's a combination of salary and supplies. It could be any of those categories, but as you saw on the previous slide, about 90% of our expenditures fall into that salary and benefits category. So in any one of these categories, you can ballpark that at least 90% of it's probably related to salary and fringe. That's just a ballpark.
Yeah, and I guess my question would have been, I would have loved to see this breaking out, because when you're saying that's all for salaries and it's actually not, that could be a little misleading. Is there any way maybe later you could just separate it, just so we can see the difference of what's the salary piece and what's being used for other things?
We can do that.
Okay.
That may not be suitable for a Zoom.
That's fine. That's fine.
Viewing. I mean, it might be kind of detailed, but we can certainly provide that. We have that information. That's all in our audit, but we certainly can provide that. But I think a good guideline is that, again, like Shelley was saying, roughly, 90% of just about everything we spend money on is salaries and wages. And so the majority of that is by far salaries and wages in those cost centers.
Yeah, and that's fine. It can be on the board briefing, just
Sure.
so you guys get a chance to get to it. Thank you so much, and thanks for the presentation.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes.
Hey,
Yeah.
Dr. Miley, how are you?
Doing well.
Just a quick question. Did I hear correctly that because of the legislature, we're going to not know a budget until 3 months after we normally would know the budget? Is that what I heard correctly?
Actually, you heard that we might not know for 6 months.
6 months.
After we
okay.
normally. The legislature usually passes a budget in June. We
Right.
thought they were gonna pass one in September, 3 months later, and they didn't. Now we may get one in January, maybe. But it kind of depends on revenue projections by the BEA. I could seriously see them coming back in January and saying, things look okay, we'll take this up for next year and we'll continue we'll use the continuing resolution until June.
Okay, yeah, right now, so it's just kind of up in the air. But then that
really
kind of
is.
leads me to, yeah, it really is, because we don't have any control over that. I guess that leads me to the kind of like my other part of my just question. So if they come back, if the legislature comes back in January and they say, okay, everything's great, blah, blah, will we still have the leeway to give employees a bonus after we have secured that? If we have the money, will we have the leeway to do that or enough time to do that?
That would be up to y'all. That's what we did last year. We got a budget passed in June of 19, and then in January of 20, when our audit was finished and we could see what we had in terms of surplus. That's what we did. The board could certainly do that if we felt like we had the resources.
Okay, that's great, because I'm glad that they held up the increase in retirement to just give us a step to pay the retirement. But, but thank you, Dr. Miley.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Mrs. Agostini.
Thank you. And Dr. Holmes did ask one of my questions, so about the expectation for the budget. So we're just continuing on the continuing resolution right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So my question for that would be then, are we getting the same amount of money as we did last year from the state, even though our enrollment has decreased?
That's a really good question. We don't know.
Okay.
We should. The the key is the allocation from the legislature to the State Department should be the same amount of dollars from the state budget to the State Department. What may change is how much individual districts get.
Okay.
So we, at this point right now, and Shelley may please chime in, we're not exactly sure whether we'll get the exact dollar amount we got last year or whether we'll get less. There are years when the State Department has to reduce the base student cost in midstream. We've had years in which as late as April or May that they will change the base student cost amount and we will get less funding than projected. So right now we are operating as if we're going to get the same amount as last year, but we don't know that yet.
Okay, thank you. And then on your line item, your per pupil spending snapshot, can just for my clarification and understanding, the last two lines of curriculum development and district-wide instructional support services and administrative and operation district, what are those?
I'm going to ask Shelley to, thanks.
That's going to basically cover predominantly all of your district level folks. Anything that doesn't specifically fall under one of these categories up here. So all your curriculum people, you know, HR, finance, basically all those other administrative type categories that wouldn't fall under any of these, the board of trustees, superintendent's office, basically everything else that isn't sitting in a school per se.
All right, thank you. That's good enough. Thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Shad.
Thank you, Ms. Agostini. Any other board members?
Mr. Shad.
Ms. Mackey, and then Mr. Manning.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Dr. Miley, for keeping us abreast of what's going on. I'm presuming, and I'm just asking to have it on the record, that as we are impacted or affected by, you know, CARES Act stimulus money, that you will keep us posted, number one, and I'm sure you will. I'm just asking that as a form of formality. What I am imploring our listening public, though, is that we please contact your legislator. We do that. We call our legislators, we email, we send district statements, asking them to support, you know, things like, you know, step increases and funding, unfunded mandates. So people who are listening, where you have the time, where you have the energy as you're able, please contact your local delegation and ask them to support our efforts. The budget that we have, we can allocate funding, but the money we get comes from state, you know, and county appropriations. So we will ask for people to also help us and join in our efforts to employ our legislative body to fund us appropriately, just respectfully, period, in a decent manner.
We will keep you up to date. And as you thanked me, I thank Shelley for her keeping me up
Thank
to
you
date
both.
as well.
Thank you both, your whole team, I know. Thank you.
The CARES Act funding has been about as dynamic as anything I think I've ever seen from the state.
Certainly.
And I don't blame them. I'm sure it's been both from the feds to the state. For instance, we had a last minute request from the State Department that we had to get an application in by October the 9th. We got that application in, and a week later they said, that's okay, we're not going to do it like that. We're just going to give you a state allocation. So thank you for doing all that work for that submission, but we're not going to use it. And we're now that it looks like we know what we're going to be getting. We'll put that in some form of update for the board so that you can see, and so the district can see, because it's been kind of a moving target, so that we can see what we will be getting from the CARES funding and when and how we can use it. So it's been a moving target.
Thank you, Dr. Miley. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Manning.
Dr. Miley, we're currently over our board policy on our reserve fund. Is that correct?
don't know whether it was my system or your system, but I could not hear you.
Yeah, you were
I can't
underwater.
hear anything.
Uh-oh.
But I couldn't hear you either,
I was
James.
underwater,
It
is that
sounded like a
Yeah.
machine.
You were just
Yeah, you
Let
were.
me try. Let me
I-
try
I
again.
think-
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I thought I might be having a stroke, so I'm so glad it wasn't me.
Oh, gosh.
I just unmuted and
I'm
muted and remuted.
getting a little worried there.
So are we currently over our board policy amount in the reserve fund? I know we were at one time.
We are above the upper limit of the board policy. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I would argue and plead with the board that that's okay right now. That's a good thing right now. But we are above the target in the board policy.
And I think I read or heard $2.5 million from local revenue, and the right positive, not in a tax increase to the taxpayers, but just from projections.
Based on the auditor's estimate, the flat millage rate should increase our total revenues from the county this year by about 2.5, between the state allocation and the county allocation, about 2.5 million. We have not got final FY 19-20 numbers from the county, so we are still holding our breath about that.
Okay, so
I would just wanted to add one quick thing to Harry's number, the 2.5 you were talking about, Harry, is the correct amount that was on the original projection sheets that we received. However, since then, we've actually gotten communications that tier $3 are being, we've already gotten notification that tier $3 are going to be cut by about $300,000.
That's the property tax reimbursement.
Yes, so that actually has already gotten chopped a little bit and is a little closer to 2.2. Just to clarify.
okay, so but because of all of this uncertainty, the district, you guys haven't put together any budget that's in addition to what we've already done, right? So there's no additional positions that we have to put in place,
Correct.
no other expenditures. We're continuing with our budget, and until we have more certainty, you won't be presenting anything to us.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. I just wanted to make sure. I think that's the prudent course to go. I agree with what you all have presented, that we need to maintain, kind of stay the course until we know where we're headed. But I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on those two issues. So thank you.
I don't make those decisions, but I would recommend that that's what we do. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members?
I agree with your recommendation. It's me as an individual board member.
Well, if that's, we appreciate your time tonight, and certainly, as always, if you have any other questions later on, just let us know, and we'll keep you up to date if we see any new changes when the BEA meets in November. We'll update you through a board brief or something if you don't read it in the paper, and keep you up to date.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Davis, Dr. Miley, and Ms. Allen.
Thank you.
All right. Now we'll move on to item 10.1, agenda items for the next meeting. So this will be the draft agenda items for November 10th, 2020. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the board, again, thank you to Dr. Miley and Ms. Allen for providing the board with that informative update regarding our current budget situation, and also having some robust discussion about the projections of where we think we may be toward the end of this school year, and possible solutions and steps we may need to take in regards to our district and its financial health. On Tuesday, November the 10th, this board meeting would represent the first board meeting after the November the 3rd elections, which means that we would be required to do our board installations. And so we have for your review and for the approval of the draft, the board installations beginning at 5 p.m. We would then move and ask for a call of order and executive session to begin at 5:30, with public session beginning at 6. And item 1.1, we'll have the call of order, and executive session items will be would be student appeals and the student admissions to a district's adult education program, should there be any. We'll move out of executive session, come back into public session, where we will have the inspirational moment and the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the approval of our agenda and the consent agenda's approval. We'll have public participation number 1 at 6.1, and at 7.1. At 7, we will have our voting on executive session items, which would include the student appeals and student admissions into the district's adult education program, if there are any. Under the new business, no action requested, 8.1, we'll have a first quarter financial statement report. We'll have an update on back to school, as this will represent the first board meeting after the November 4th return in phase 2. We'll have an update regarding American Education Week at 8.3. We'll then move on to item 9.1, which is the approval of the draft agenda or the review of the draft agenda, and then ask for the approval of that agenda at 10.1, followed by a second public participation and board and superintendent comments. And if there is a need for executive session 2, we will reconvene for that and then vote on any executive session 2 items and then ask for an adjournment.
All right, thank you, Dr. Davis.
Yes, sir.
Now, item 11.1, approval of the draft agenda items for November 10th, 2020 regular board meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Maggie?
I move to approve the draft agenda items for the November 10th, 2020 regular board meeting of the Richland 2 School Board of Trustees.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Dr. Caution Park, I think you were first. All right, any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry.
Ms. Agostini first, and then Dr. Elkins.
I just wanted to get verification or confirmation of where the meeting will take place. Would this be an in-person meeting, or would this be virtual?
This will be an in-person meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Elkins?
Well, that was similar to my question. I was going to ask, although this meeting will be in person, is it open to the public for them to attend, Dr. Davis, or just for board members?
No, we will have limited seating and spacing for public to attend this meeting, adhering to the social distancing rules and regulations provided to us by the CDC and DHEC.
Would that be on a first come, first serve basis, so we won't have someone feeling it?
Yes, ma'am, it'll be on a first. I'm sorry, I thought someone else was talking. It'll be on a first come, first serve basis. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, is there any way we can put that out there on our website so it will be no confusion to anyone?
If I'm not mistaken, we've already had plans to put that information out and share that information with our viewing public on participation at this board meeting. We'll also have in-person public participation as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Davis.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, please register your vote.
The vote is 6-1.
Thank you. The motion carries. Now we'll move on to item 12.1, our second public participation, and that will be presented by Ms. Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. I will begin with comments from Abby Collins. Dear School Board and Dr. Davis, I am writing as a concerned student about the conditions that school will reopen in. My mom is a teacher, and I have many good friends who are teachers. As such, due to events I saw in Spring Valley's PSAT testing, I'm concerned about the procedures being followed when we go back to school. I would like to first point out that my school did some things right. They had one-way signs, and outside the school building, teachers corrected people's masks if how they wore them was inadequate. That being said, the rest of the problems I'm mentioning were worthy of concern. The main problem was there was barely any social distancing. In my classroom, desks weren't spaced. Half the desks were marked with dry erase markers, X's, and students weren't allowed to sit on them. Crowds of people weren't told not to display PDA, public displays of affection. There were groups of people clustered together, and there was no social distancing markers. But probably the worst thing was the stairwells, which we were promised by the school to be designated up or down stairs, were not that. There were no markings indicating a way to go down them. Instead, all stairs could be walked in either direction, and if we weren't all going in the same direction to go to the test, students would have crossed each other and gotten pretty close as a result. Also, the mask policy wasn't enforced inside. I sat next to a boy who had his mask down just enough to have part of his nostrils sticking out. He still had the mask like that for the whole time we were testing, and nobody called him out. It made me feel uncomfortable, and I worry there were multiple people doing this. I ask you, school board, to consider this. If these simple methods of social distancing aren't enforced in an environment where only 10th and a few 11th graders are in the building, then how will it be enforced with a full house? And how will the various elderly teachers, teachers with health conditions, or teachers who have young kids not get infected at some point? COVID cases are already on the rise in this state, and I fear that if we reopen like this, it'll only make it worse. What I'm saying is either have a good method of reopening schools as safely as you can, or prepare to accept the consequences. Thanks for reading. Abby Collins, student of Spring Valley High School. Myra Oliver. I'm a teacher and parent. My accommodations request was denied. The letter from my 6-year-old son's oncologist explains why neither of us can be in a public setting. He received a life-saving treatment this summer to hopefully help him fight 2 forms of cancer. He is also a student here. 1 week before COVID shut down our district in March is when he received his second cancer diagnosis. Being able to be with him in the hospital and still work remotely was a huge blessing. He was put on life support this summer due to his treatment, and that has since put his cancer in remission and hopefully saved his life. While he has made a great recovery, he and I are unable to be around other people and risk being exposed to COVID. Think of social emotional health. Please consider my son, who for 2.5 years was isolated due to his compromised immune system. His social emotional health was compromised as well in that time. He finally was approved to attend school, and COVID changed that. This virtual setting has allowed him to create connections with his teachers and classmates, even if not ideal. If I am unable to continue working for Rich too, then he will also lose this social emotional outlet. He tells me stories about his teachers and his classmates, and he enjoys being with them. It gives him an outlet to connect and heal emotionally, while still keeping him safe. My team is in support of me being the virtual teacher throughout the year. There was an overwhelming number of students at our school that wanted to stay virtual all year. My principal has been in support of me remaining virtual and in doing it from home. Sorry, I lost my place. I will find it. When approved through the district. Sorry, my principal has been in support of me remaining virtual and doing it from home remotely when approved through the district. Since my son would be exposed to any germs I bring home, it is best for me not to work outside of the home. I have been successfully teaching 40 students remotely from my home. While some of my teammates will need to be dual modality, we have a large number of students in our grade level that are still going to be virtual from their home. At this point, my team will not need another dual modality teacher. I would ask that you reconsider my accommodation request while keeping in mind why I'm requesting this, is to protect a student of yours, my son. His life is worth this remote accommodation. I am asking to work remotely from my home to continue the same job I've been doing. I understand there are other duties that are better performed in person, but my team and school have agreed they do not mind not being home in order to protect one of their own students, my son. We are the family that hasn't been in a store or a restaurant since March 5th. We haven't spent time with family or friends. While I understand the accommodations are regarding the employee, this unique situation has me, the employee, directly affecting my son's health and possible survival. Unfortunately, if I'm not allowed to work from home due to the needs of protecting his life, I would have to resign from my position as teacher, which is not what I want to do, nor do I want to be forced into doing that. If I'm given no other option, not only will you lose a teacher who cares, who loves her job, who loves her students, and who wants to pursue this career, but my son, your student, will also no longer be able to attend his one constant, his school. Ashley Walker. I'm a Richland 2 teacher speaking to the district, but also to district families and the public. Please advocate for us when our advocacy is not enough. The safety of Richland 2 employees in school buildings is not being protected. We were told in official district communication on 10/26 that we would be expected to cover classes when a teacher is quarantined or sick if substitutes are not available, increasing our risk of exposure. We will not receive any compensation for covering these classes. In that same email, the district confirmed that they will not approve accommodations to work from home for any teachers, regardless of their doctor's recommendations. All teachers are required to work from their school buildings on Fridays when students will be at home, making deep cleaning impossible and furthering our risk of exposure. Teachers were promised that we would not be expected to teach virtually and in person at the same time, yet that is what we required of us in phase 2. In case the public is not aware, high school teachers have 3 cohorts of students. A and B each attend in person 2 days a week, and cohort E remains virtual full-time. Although they are enrolled in our class, they meet in person. Under the new term dual modality, which is used to describe streaming a live lesson on Google Meet, teachers are being required to divide their attention among multiple groups of students and teach multiple groups at once. We must monitor in-person students for engagement, behavior, social distancing, and mask compliance. We must at the same time monitor virtual students for attendance and engagement. We are being provided no additional teacher aides to make this easier, nor are we being provided with additional compensation for doing what is arguably more than one teacher's job. Meanwhile, the students receive less than the teacher's full attention because they are pulled in so many directions. Throughout the school year, Richland 2 will lose many of its most talented and passionate educators due to the demands and treatment we are experiencing from the district. We do not want to quit, but we do want fair treatment. We are asking for unencumbered planning time, the option to work virtually on Fridays, and additional compensation for additional responsibilities. Families and the public, please advocate for us. Thank you. Tracy Wilbur. The lack of concern and consideration for school district employees who have requested reasonable accommodations is astonishing and disgraceful. The board and district office personnel are enduring data that shows an increase in COVID-19 numbers since the decision was made to move into phase 2 in order to appease a handful of people. The vast majority of our students, at least my students, are remaining at home during phase 2. Yet as a teacher with a number of underlying health conditions and a physician's order to remain in a virtual environment, I'm still expected to return to the classroom beginning November 2nd to supervise the handful of students who will be returning to school. In addition to my normal instruction duties, I will be forced to come into contact with a myriad of unknown students on a daily basis as I stand in the hall between classes and say, keep moving. Every 3 weeks, I will be forced to come in contact with yet another group of unknown students during outdoor lunch duty, where students will be permitted to remove masks, and there's absolutely no way to contact trace a potential exposure since there are students that will most likely be unknown to me. The district has determined that allowing teachers to remain in a virtual environment, regardless of underlying health conditions and physician's orders, would cause an undue hardship. I ask, what kind of hardship will the district experience when teachers become sick and potentially die? You have provided every opportunity for parents and students to remain safe if they choose, but you have denied teachers who seek the same opportunity. The most ironic aspect of this entire comment is that it has to be read to you during a virtual board meeting. The 7 board members and the superintendent still do not feel comfortable holding an in-person, socially distant school board meeting for less than 2 hours in a room that is 2 or 3 times the size of most classrooms in the school district. Yet you feel comfortable sending teachers back in the classroom to remain for 8 hours and encounter an unknown number of students as well as other adults. The district keeps saying that teachers can apply for FMLA, and if granted, they will not be required to perform their instructional duties. But who will teach the students then? You act as though you believe we do not want to teach. Nothing is further from the truth. We just want to be safe while teaching. Would you rather have someone with no expertise in a subject matter in a classroom than offer the simple accommodations? What complaints do you think you will receive from the parent then? We have been teaching successfully and safely in a virtual environment for months. Why not give those who have a legitimate medical need the opportunity to continue teaching in a safe virtual environment? Kristen McGuire. I'm completely bewildered at how a district can execute phase 1 so seamlessly, yet mismanage phase 2 so easily. As it stands, my daughter's teacher will not have a designated planning period, but once every other week. Teachers require thoughtful planning, and the idea that teachers will have to do this planning on their own time is unacceptable. Planning while your children are in the room being instructed by someone else does not count as uninterrupted planning time. Children understand the hierarchy of a classroom, and there's no way that teacher will get uninterrupted time to focus on instruction. Our teachers deserve designated time to plan for instruction, and our children deserve thoughtful and engaging lessons. The district has claimed that having too many teachers out with accommodations would create an undue hardship for the district. What happens when those teachers retire early or find employment outside of education? That creates an undue hardship on the students. I am further frustrated by teachers who have serious medical issues being denied accommodations to work virtually. It seems with half of the district choosing to remain virtual at this time, it would make sense to try to take care of those teachers whose doctors have deemed them high risk for serious complications or even death. Several teachers have already put in their resignations. Who will teach those students? Instead of trying to keep good teachers who temporarily need to teach virtually, you are leaving students with no teacher. How is that good for anyone? In addition, the expectation that teachers use their own sick time should they have to quarantine due to an exposure at school after January 1st does not demonstrate the commitment to teachers that some board members claim to have as they ask for my vote while I wait in line. In light of no movement at the federal level to cover employees who are working during this time and will likely be exposed, the district should step up to make sure employees do not have to choose between coming to work sick or using up their sick time. The single mother and teacher should not have to choose between coming to work with a potential exposure or taking leave without pay. When we moved here 7 years ago, we were attracted to a district we thought was committed to taking care of the people who take care of our children. These new policies and unprecedented times appear short-sighted and hypocritical of the district's goal to attract and retain teachers. No amount of telling me in the polling line that you are pro-student and pro-teacher will convince me otherwise as long as these policies remain in place. Lisa Sanderson. My kids get a lot of colds during the winter months, usually just stuffy noses with a cough, but lasting for around 2 weeks. Since I'm sure it's going to be recommended to keep them home until the cold passes, will they be able to go on to virtual school to learn so they don't fall behind? Will those days be counted as absent? Mike Remia. Thank you for taking the time to read my comments this evening. I'm writing concerning the plan for elementary students returning to face-to-face learning. Elementary parents were tasked with deciding whether to send their children back to school or keep them learning virtually. This is obviously a decision that was not taken lightly by many families, including mine. We decided to send our children back to school feeling that the information provided by the school district was the most up-to-date and current information available. I am extremely disappointed to receive information last night, less than 2 weeks before children return to school, that every Friday will be a half day for elementary students. This information would have been of great influence in my decision returning my children to school or keeping them virtual. I understand that the time without students will be used for planning for teachers. However, there are many other ways students could have received services on Friday instead of 3 hours in school. This schedule also raises many problems for parents regarding transportation and childcare. A vast majority of parents are back to work full-time now and cannot afford to take off to pick up their children at 11:30 every Friday. I think it was underhanded for this information to be released after our decision was to be made. The district has a track record of not providing enough information to parents and students, and it needs to stop now. Again, thank you for your time, Mike Remia, owner, Soda City Builders. Camille Myers-Smith. Dr. Davis and this board should be ashamed of themselves for how you have treated these teachers these last few months. You all set them up. As these other districts in the state used the virtual school to accommodate their teachers who were high risk and had the ADA, you all lied to them, told them in August that they would be these e-learning teams to protect them. Did you do it? No, you just abandoned them. Well, not those elementary teachers. Their principals took care of them. Now what are you supposed to do? Bunches of them are quitting. Heard you won't even let them take FML thing. So what are you going to do now, Dr. Davis? Let ghosts teach these kids. The teachers are gold. They do all the real work around here. Man, my grand treated stray dogs better. So what is your plan now for these high-risk teachers you expect to teach these kids? Those poor teachers ain't even going to be able to eat their lunches because the kids are eating in the classroom too. How are you going to keep them safe if they got to go stand in hundreds of kids on car duty or cafeteria duty or just hallways with hundreds of kids and people? How do you plan to do that, Dr. Davis? Because all around the state, other schools let these high-risk teachers stay home. So how are you going to keep them safe since you couldn't be bothered to do that for them? David Oberly. Hello, I usually use this time to advocate for the return to face-to-face instruction. I'm very passionate about it as my daughter struggles so badly with e-learning to the point they were saying they hate school. That broke my heart to hear. As face-to-face is happening now, I will instead use this time to publicly thank the administration for moving forward. Also, a thank you to the teachers, especially my daughter's teachers, for being so accommodating to their needs as they struggle with e-learning. Lastly, but not least, a huge thank you to Libby Rue for the tiring job of reading hundreds of comments aloud during this time. Thank you. Erica Miller. The current virtual education system is a challenge for everyone. All of the children are being held to the same standard of learning, understanding, and to use computer technology. However, all children are not on the same technological level. Watching videos and being expected to complete assignments is not the same as having a teacher appear on screen to teach the lesson and answer questions. There are a lot of students falling behind and being left behind in needed skill sets for upcoming standardized tests. There is also no set standard across the district, and students are confused, stressed, and not performing as well as they could be. Chris Haas. Dear Dr. Davis and members of the Richland 2 School Board, as we prepare to transition to phase 2 and welcome roughly half our students back into the physical classroom, I want to call on the district to reconsider the requirement that e-learning teachers be forced under all circumstances to work from their assigned school building. A number of our certified staff who offered to teach e-learning this year did so because they had significant health issues of their own or within their immediate families. It's devastating to see them forced to take professional leave when they could simply continue teaching the virtual students as they have been doing for the past 6 weeks remotely. We understand the challenge comes in where one draws the line between who qualifies and who does not. This issue is unavoidable. That said, some of the cases are quite severe. For instance, we currently have a district colleague whose premature baby is not allowed to attend childcare due to the incredible health risk given under her underdeveloped lungs and heart condition. For her safety, the family has been sheltering at home since last March. How do we make someone choose between the health of their vulnerable child and a paycheck when they could just as easily perform their duties remotely as they can in a school building? This is only a handful of cases where these hard decisions are being forced upon those within our Richland 2 family. Again, I ask you all to revisit this requirement, especially now as we see cases and trends across the state making a turn for the worse. Thank you, Chris Haas. And that concludes the public participation, Mr. Shab.
Thank you, Ms. Ruth. Now we'll move to item 13.1, board and superintendent comments. And I will start, Dr. Elkins, you're in the top corner.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shad. And thank you, Libby, for reading all those comments. My heart goes out to the teachers and especially the ones that have health issues. What I'm going to say, and not sure how we can do this, but I would request of Dr. Davis that he maybe have a meeting, a workshop with the board, just to give us an update of how many teachers that are requesting this medical history of leave time and how many we've granted, as well as the reopening of the school. I'd like to know that because I'm quite concerned about the amount of messages that we receive from teachers with health issues and being rejected. And again, there's always two sides to the story. So I would love to be able to have a workshop with the board just to give us an update of exactly what's going on with how many students are willing to return back to school, how many teachers with health issues that have made that request, and how many that we have denied and how many we have requested. Because this really breaks my heart, but I also know on the other side that parents are demanding that kids return back to school. So I know it's a very tough decision to make, but I think as board members, I think we need to be current and up to date exactly what's going on. So when we receive these messages, we won't feel like, and I'll speak for myself, that you're in the blind and you're not sure of what's going on. So that's my comment, and I look forward to maybe having a board workshop very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carson Parker.
I want to first thank Dr. Miley for that wonderful report, and Shelley Allen as well. And as of this point, I don't have any other comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Agostini.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. 4 years ago, when I ran for school board, I was commended by many for taking on what they described as a thankless job. I sit here today full of gratitude and will share that that was not my experience. I thank the Richland 2 community, the employees, the students and the families for their outpouring of support and gratitude the last 4 years. It has been my honor to serve. On that note, Jim and I want to thank all of the teachers, the coaches, the club reps, and the administrators who've inspired, motivated, and challenged our children. While there are many who impacted the Agostini kids, the Agostini
Miss Agostini, I'm sorry, it got muted. I'm so sorry. Can you?
How far did you hear?
Jim and I.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
The teachers, I think that's where you were. I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, Jim and I just want to thank the teachers, coaches, club reps, and administrators who've inspired and motivated and challenged our children. While there are many who impacted the Agostini kids, they came up with a list of who the highlights were. And Coach McKnight, Coach Davis, Dr. Wyatt, Miss Fowler, Mr. Owens, Mr. Ugro, Miss Reeves, Miss Spigner, Miss Collins, and Mr. Timoni. Also, Jim and I want to extend a very special thank you to Kim Boucher, Stephanie Courtney, and Shirley Vickery. Our girls would not have had the opportunities they have without these 3 women. I will close with the Irish blessing. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sunshine warm upon your face. May the rain fall short upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of his hand. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, we're in a tough position between providing a quality education, which we know for many of our students, particularly elementary, some of our special ed students, and others that need to be in person to receive the best education that they can during these tough times. I applaud administration and the board for the difficult decisions. And, I do feel for those who are at higher risk. There's no easy answer to any of this. There's no right answer, easy way to do this. Dr. Davis and his team have a tremendously difficult position, just in a tremendously difficult position for the decisions that have to be made for this. And I know, Dr. Davis, you've mentioned many times that you do not take lightly the staff and the position that this puts them in. So I do feel for all involved in this. We're doing the best we can with what we've all been dealt, which is a tough hand. So I do appreciate it, Dr. Miley and your staff. Shelley, thank you so much for all the work that you do with our budget. Again, you're in a tough spot with having no clue as to where this thing is going to go, but having to make sure that we fund the positions, all the PPE, all the extra that it takes to get us through this pandemic. So thank you for everyone and the effort that you're putting in to do the best that we can for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Mrs. Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the people who are taking the time to attend the meeting tonight and gain information for yourselves firsthand, thank you for the sacrifice of your time. You're not having to leave whatever building you're in, but you are sacrificing your time. And for that, we appreciate that. And I hope that we are being respectful of that. I just want to say that the stories I hear from parents and teachers, both electronically and by phone, by social media, as I respond to them, my heart breaks. If it were my personal predilection with regard, we're in the middle of a crisis. And we're sitting here tonight talking about our crisis because that is public enemy number one. It's up front. That's what our priority is. If it were up to me, I wouldn't leave the house if I didn't have to until, the line is adequately flattened or until we have a vaccine, or nothing would be open except for, critical areas. But it's not up to me. This is a tough spot we're in, echoing much of what Mr. Manning just said. We've got parents who want their kids back in school. We have teachers whose lives deserve to be valued. We have students whose lives deserve to be valued. This is a tough spot, and we are trying the very best we can with the hands we're dealt. But I just want to extend my prayers to our students, to our teachers. This is not a fair situation for anybody, and we're trying the absolute best we can. But I want to thank the people. Not everyone, has the time to, or makes the time or wherewithal to send a comment in publicly, but for the people who call, for the people who email or are able to contact us so that we can field your questions to the district office and to HR to consider your medical histories or to look at something and make sure that the determination is accurate. Thank you for doing that. Please don't stop. When you contact, I'll only speak for me, when you contact me, I'm going to ratchet those concerns to the people they need to go to look at. Don't stop doing that. Each person's situation is an individual one. And every individual person is affected and impacted by this crisis. And so my prayers go out to our teachers, to our students, to our families, to our parents, to our staff members. This is tough. And I don't have, an adequate answer. We're trying very best to deal with what we've been handed, but this is a tough situation, and my prayers go out to everyone involved. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. Dr. Holmes.
Okay, whereas we heard the teachers when they were concerned, the elementary teachers when they were concerned about Friday and the time, and we kind of adjusted that to help our teachers. I've sat here tonight and I've listened to the public part of our board meeting, and my heart just goes out to those teachers and families for the things that they're saying. And I tend to agree with my colleague, Dr. Elkins, on this particular issue, that maybe there are some areas that need to be looked at and readdressed. One thing that I heard tonight, I heard that the teachers, if this is true, because like I said, I'm not sure and have not been briefed on all of the nuances of what we're doing to that detailed level. But if teachers are being asked to use their own time, if they have to be forced to quarantine, I think that would be, to me, one example of something that might need to be revisited. If we have teachers that have, like the one that I heard tonight by Chris, I think it was Chris High, said a teacher had a baby who cannot absolutely on any circumstances be put in that kind of situation. And if that teacher wants to continue to work, then that teacher, those individual cases like that may not be, should not, and may not need to be the decision of one or two individual persons, because I think that warrants being looked back at, because those are things that can be life or death situations. Having said that, I also understand that we are in a pandemic and we get letters and cards and notes from people who want this way and this way. And it is a very tough position to be in. And I commend our district and Dr. Davis and Dr. Miley and everybody else who's worked on this. We held out for as longer than most districts held out. And even with that, I'm not saying, again, like I said earlier, that I don't think that there are some things that we need to look at from hearing these teachers' concerns, because as we're talking tonight, I am the only board member that is a current educator that actually is back at school and goes into a building every day. So I, out of everybody, understand your sincere concerns, and I know that they do too, but I'm living your concern. So I get it. So like I said, kudos to Dr. Davis and his staff. I think you have done a lot, but sometimes, just like we revised and we looked at certain things, I think there are maybe some issues from some of the letters that we're hearing. And again, I'm going to echo this, as I think Dr. Elkins also said. I also understand, sitting in this position, there are also two sides to every story. We're only hearing one side of it, but there is also another side. And then that's when the decision has to be made. But then if something is so vivid, then maybe it does not need to be just looked at by one person, one or two people. Having said that, please know that if the crisis, in my opinion, I can only speak for myself as a board member on this part, if the crisis were to get to a situation where the numbers were egregious again and we just couldn't contain it, I don't think that there's any board member, including myself, that wouldn't pull the plug on phase 2. I'm sure that they would agree with me on that, but I can't speak for everyone. But to the parents that are at home, to the staff, to the teachers, trust and believe. We are not taking this lightly. We are not. We are living this with you. And know that my heart goes out with you. And I do agree that we need to work together collectively. Sorry I was a little long, but this is heavy on my heart tonight. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
Mr. Shad, before Dr. Davis goes, can I make a comment quickly?
Yes, ma'am, very quickly. Yes, ma'am.
Just wanted to say, thank you, Dr. Holmes, for that comment. But although I'm a retired educator, I still work in schools because I work as an educational consultant. So you're not quite the only educator that still goes into schools. I go in schools and work with teachers and students as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. Thank you, members of the board. I had, as usually, remarks prepared to share with the board and with our public today. And I think it's important that I do share these remarks, but I would ask for just a few moments just to share what's on my heart, because I'm a little disheartened this evening, and very few things affect me in this way. But it is important to remind our community that on November the 3rd, Tuesday, November the 3rd is election day. So please exercise your right to vote. And if you have not already done so, national, state, and local races are on the ballot. It is important that you exercise your right to vote. There are 10 candidates that are running to fill 3 positions for Richland School District's 2 Board of Trustees, and those candidates are Ms. Lindsay Agostini, Dr. D. Bell Williams, Dr. Monica Elkins, Dion Jacobs, LaShonda McFadden, Rhonda Meisner, James Mobley, Jamie Shad III, Lawrence Superstar Taylor, and Mary Ann Wright. And on November the 3rd is a district holiday, as many of our buildings will be used as polling stations. We're working closely with the election commissions and service solutions to make sure that the limited areas that are used for voting are completely cleaned before school opens. The schools open their doors on November the 4th. Phase 2 of the district's reopening plan begins on Wednesday, November the 4th. And as we prepare to welcome students back face-to-face, we're focusing on strategies that to allow us to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 as well as other viruses. Factors in things such as wearing a mask by everyone in the school building and while on school buses, frequently hand washing and using hand sanitizers, and dispensers are being installed in all of our classrooms. Social distancing of as close to 6 feet will be possible, and the addition of sneeze guards and plexiglass where there is difficulty to achieve that. We're asking our students and our staff to stay home if they are ill and they get a flu shot if they have not already done so. Service Solutions and the district's custodial service provider has developed a comprehensive plan to ensure that our schools are clean, sanitized, and safe. This plan includes the use of electrostatic sprayers daily and adding additional staff to clean touch points. And every school has received additional supplies to assist with cleaning, sanitation, social distancing, and other safety measures. We are doing all that we can to ensure that we provide our students and our employees, all employees, with a safe environment in these times of this pandemic. I've listened to many statements in public participation, and I thank those individuals for expressing themselves as they saw fit in public participation. I thank those individuals who have emailed me personally and directly to advocate for whatever position they may take, whether that position was to stay virtual or to come and offer students a face-to-face option when we were completely virtual. I've heard it all from every possible angle as superintendent. I have sat very quietly and watched members of our community in some way and form fabricate facts and fashion falsehoods into their own personal truths to push their own personal agendas. I've watched individuals play both sides of the fence to create discourse in this district. I have watched people attempt to create false narratives that are filled with despair and hopelessness. I've watched people fight over the health and safety or politicize the health and safety of our students, of our teachers, and all of our employees. But what has remained constant in this is this. We laid out a plan back in April, May, June, and we communicated that plan to our community. And that plan was our re-entry plan into our schools. Phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. In phase 1, when other school districts decided to vacate their plans for various reasons, whether they were pressured or not, or for political reasons or not, or they caved to parent concerns or pressures, we followed our plan. And our plan had 3 components to it: the incident rates, the trend in incident rate, and the 2-week positivity rate. That plan was devised of when we would re-enter, go into from phase 1 to phase 2, based off of the committee that we put together that will allow to help us make that decision. We had over 100 people on that team, whether they were teachers, district office personnel, healthcare professionals, parents, and administrators. And we said that in phase 1, we would stay completely virtual if we were considered a high spread county. And we did that. We did not waver. We did not buckle. We did not bow our heads. We did exactly what we said we were going to do. And we stood firm as a district for our teachers and our employees and our students. Regardless of whether or not there were pressure from parents who wanted a face-to-face option, we made some concessions in areas that needed to be made, whether it was special education students and meeting their needs, whether they were our 3 and 4-year-old students who needed to be in schools for various reasons. We put together a plan that included providing childcare services for our students, and in every turn of our plan, there was criticisms and critiques by individuals within the community and even those in leadership. But we remain firm and committed to the safety of our community. When the data began to shift, we told our community that the data was trending in the direction that we were preparing to move to phase 2. We used the zip code data to predict that the county data was trending. We did not use the zip code data to make a decision. We use it as a predictor. And that zip code data turned out to be a good indicator that the county data was shifting. The county data shifted, and we are preparing to move to phase 2. This was inevitable, and we all knew it, and we were all preparing for it. I've sent 3 children to school every day. I will send 3 children to school every day. I will send a spouse to school every day. There are those in my home that have underlying conditions as well. I recognize the challenge and the sacrifice that teachers, all employees have to make, because these decisions are based on all employees. We are a family. There's no segment, no silos or nothing. We are a family. There are all employees. Our bus drivers as important to me and their families as a teacher, and their families are important to us. Those individuals who pick up who clean our schools are as important to us as those who teach an AP class or a Algebra 1 class. We will continue to follow our plan. When we have to make an adjustments, we will. And if the data begins to shift, you can rest assured that we will stand firm in making the decision to move if we need to move back to phase 1 to protect our community. I have never wavered or shifted on that at all. And to put in place or to state or suggest that is something that has happened, I am disheartened by that. I have gotten emails from students who have been, for lack of better words, encouraged by adults to state their position. Utilizing our children to do that bothers me. That bothers me to do that. That speaks to who we are as individuals and as a team. That bothers me. So I ask you all, continue to remain resolute. Continue to work together, to be collaborative, not to split up and work in silos and work apart. And if there are concerns, to address your concerns the appropriate way. And not to make this an us against them. I've been saying this from the beginning. to not make this an us against them situation. We have to come out of COVID-19 stronger than we went into COVID-19. And I will continue to do everything that I can to ensure that the people that we started with will be the people that we end with. I have not wavered on that. I have not buckled on that. This administration will not do that. But you have to continue to believe and trust in the decisions that this leadership makes, because it is about everybody. Not just teachers, not just administrators. To say things like the district office staff is not, and we've been back to work before teachers have been back to work, 5 days a week. And that's just not, those are just not true statements. And to put that out in the air, we are no better than what we see nationally if we practice those things locally. Continue to be blessed, continue to be safe, continue to put purpose over preference. I appreciate you all, and I love you all. Y'all have a great night.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Thank you, Dr. Miley and Ms. Allen, for the budget update. Thank you to all my fellow board members. Thank you, Dr. Davis and the administration. Thank you for the public participation. As we've seen and observed from the mood of the country, the mood of where we are locally, we've seen even in our public participation, things have come in waves. So when we decided to follow the Accelerate Ed recommendations, and it will be based on the science, the numbers, the trends, the rates, the positivity, we made the decision. Many would say a decision that was not popular when you look at other districts in our state. We were one of a few who decided to stay virtual for phase one. And there was a wave of parents, some students, but for the most part, it was the parents saying that they were being denied the choice to go into the school. We explained that logistically and from health reasons that would not happen. And I'll say with phase one, the vast majority of our teachers applauded us and said, yes, you are protecting us. And we appreciate that. And so then it went into a us versus them situation where parents, some parents wanted to have their students go back into the school with our teachers. And we're at a high rate in our county. But rather than going through just the guidelines that was given to us by DHEC, the district made a decision to start looking at zip codes so that we could see from our specific community where we were. The zip code data showed that we were slightly better than the overall county. And that showed a trend, showed a shift that we may be able to go to phase two in a reasonable period of time. Now, we said from the beginning that it would be a 2-week heads up to our staff, to our family, to let everyone know. The district went further than that. I believe it was 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, close to a month of a heads up that we wouldn't go back until November 4th. And then the wave shifted. Some parents started applauding us for now moving to phase two. We had teachers who then were not happy. They were disappointed. And of course, some of them have health concerns. And it's not, from my standpoint, it's not that the district was not taking that into consideration. But one of the things that I saw in the public participation tonight was that the denial of the accommodations that were requested by the teachers were that it would cause an undue hardship to the district. I read that to mean that if the accommodations under the circumstances that were provided, this is just my opinion, that if that were allowed, and I do understand that not only do we have a teacher shortage, we have the substitute teacher shortage. So we literally, from a logistics standpoint, would not be able to absorb the students if those teachers were unable to come to school. That's a tough call. I totally get it. I'm married to an educator, so I totally get it. So, you know, I just don't know how you balance the need for students to be educated in school, and roughly half are going back to school, half are staying virtual. And then with the teachers to teach, you know, dual modality or not being granted, you know, their request to work virtually. But what I am confident in is that our district is prepared for November 4th from a standpoint of the PPE, from the standpoint of encouraging and ensuring that the mask wearing will reduce the spread. It's not going to make it go away. We know that. But from what we hear from the scientists is that wearing the mask consistently, practicing social distancing and in physical distancing, and then where we can't do that, that there are, you know, the necessary barriers that are in place to ensure that. Now, you know, anecdotally, we've heard from some of these teachers in these other districts and staff where they went, as part of their phase one, it was hybrid, or they were just back in face-to-face. And we've heard that there have been outbreaks. We've heard that, okay? You can almost look and say, okay, is this going to be a preview of where we're going to be? But when you make tough calls, you make tough decisions, you know that there are consequences as a result of it. You're not going to be able to please everyone. That is clear. So our hope is that we still remain vigilant, that the adults will do what they need to do to make sure that the spread does not increase. Clearly that has not happened because we're seeing the national numbers, and, you know, some numbers here locally are not the best. It's not ideal. It may even be, I would gather to say that it's going higher. It's trending in a different way. But you just heard from Dr. Davis say that there are, based on the information, he may, or the administration may decide to go back to phase one. We don't want to go back to phase one. We don't. We want to get to phase three, but that requires everybody to do their part. And clearly since March or February, that has not happened. So I keep stressing that adult behavior is going to address this. And, you know, I applaud, you know, I agree, you know, to have children involved in speaking. And I don't want to stop students from speaking, but if it's being led by the adults, having the students with regard, whether it's shaming or what have you, I just don't know about that. I just don't know about that. So, of course, my heart goes out to our teachers, especially those with health concerns, but even those who are relatively healthy, but still could come down with this. You know, these decisions, again, are very tough, and we hope that things will work out as best as they can. Of course, not ideal. We don't have that anymore. And so I applaud our teachers. I don't want to give the platitudes. I said that before because it's almost empty now, because this is now where the rubber meets the road. And my hope is that November 4th and the rest of the year will go well. But again, it's dependent upon all of us to remain together, not to see each other as, different corners or different constituents. We're all our children are constituents, okay? And so we have to do our part, including the messaging that we give to others. So, this is tough. It's tough hearing it. It's tough going through it, but we will not buckle and we will not fold. So thank you all again. I appreciate each and every one of you. everybody please go vote if you haven't already. And I wish you all well. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, which is at item 16.1.
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Mackey,
I move to adjourn the October 27th, 2020 Richland 2 regular board meeting of the Richland 2 School Board of Trustees.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Dr. Caution Parker. Any discussion? All those in favor, please register your vote or do your hand vote. Ms. Agostini, Dr. Holmes, Dr. Caution Parker are in the affirmative. Dr. Elkins is in the affirmative.
Vote is 7-0.
Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you all so much. This meeting is adjourned. Take care and stay safe.